Thank you so much. Welcome to the Local Job Centers and Workforce Development Boards, a statewide overview sponsored by Wisconsin Literacy. Wisconsin Literacy is a nonprofit statewide coalition of 70 literacy agencies, and we strengthen literacy statewide through expert trainings, personalized consultation, health literacy, workforce connections, and advocacy. I'm really excited to introduce our presenters, Mari Kay-Nabozny and Bruce Palzkill. Mari is a workforce development professional who collaborates with nonprofit organizations, municipalities, and other entities to grow the regional economy and connect employers to workers and vice versa. After spending 7 years working as the Chief Information Officer for the Wisconsin Workforce Development Association, Mari knows the hard work and creativity necessary to successfully implement local workforce board solutions across Wisconsin. Mari served as the CEO of the Northwest Wisconsin Workforce Investment Board since 2012 and continues to pursue innovation and inspiration in every aspect of the board's work. Bruce is Assistant Administrator for the Division of Employment and Training at the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. He just began his 29th year with the department. His career began as a field manager for job service, managing job center operations in Southwest Wisconsin for 16 years. For the last 13 years, he's worked in the central office as the Job Service Bureau Director and in his current role. He manages bureaus that oversee registered and youth apprenticeship, the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, job service, job seeker, and workforce partner customer groups. Really happy to have both Mari and Bruce on the call today, or on the webinar. Just want to let folks know that you can ask questions throughout the presentation. Just put them in the chat and I will be monitoring the chat. Also, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. So either option is great. And with that, I will let Bruce and Mari take it away.
Well, thank you, Beth. I'm going to go first. I'm going to sort of set the stage at the state level and then segue over to Mari so she can speak at the local level, which I think most people on this webinar will be more interested in. But we wanted to make sure you had a sense of how the State Department of Workforce Development intersects with our local job center system and with our local workforce boards. So that's my job, to give you a sense of how the structure starts from the federal level down to the state level and then down to the local level. So next slide, please. So the Department of Workforce Development, the slide that you're looking at right now, has 6 key divisions. And the one on the left I'll leave for last. So on the second one, you have the Division of Workers' Compensation, Equal Rights, Division of Operations, Unemployment Insurance, and the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And the latter is the one that serves persons with disabilities. The far left is the division that I'm in, the Division of Employment and Training, and that's the one that we'll be focusing on for today's presentation. So next slide, please. So within our Division of Employment and Training, as Beth had mentioned in opening comments, we have some key areas that we oversee. Workforce training, and Mari will speak a lot about that in her presentation as well. Our job service operations, our Office of Skills Development, which provides a variety of training grants through a competitive process out to employer groups throughout the state. Our veteran services area, we have designated staff that specifically serve returning military veterans, especially those with significant barriers to employment. We have our workforce information and technical support area, which generates all of the labor market information for the state of Wisconsin. I know one of our staff, field staff up in Northwest Wisconsin, Scott Hodick, was presenting to this conference, I think just before this. He would work in that area, helping to put together labor market data, labor market analysis, projections, and the like. We oversee both the state of Wisconsin's youth and registered apprenticeship programs. So for youth, we work with school consortia around the state, providing dollars to them to get high school juniors and seniors into co-enrollment situations where they're taking some classes beyond high school, working in some sort of an employer situation in a very targeted sector to gain valuable work experience. And of course, we have a wide array of apprentices, easily and always over 10,000 apprentices around the state in a variety of sectors working in registered apprenticeship. So another big area for us. And then we have our Office of Special Initiatives, where we are doing some pretty cool stuff of late. We are opening up job centers inside of prisons throughout the state. COVID has slowed things down a bit, but hopefully as we get in a post-COVID space, by the end of this year, we will likely be in as many as 10 prison locations around the state, offering job center services inside of them for folks that are incarcerated. They're going to be being released from prison and trying to figure out what their needs are. Definitely can be strong linkages to things, including literacy, as far as their needs to help get them so when they get out of prison, they are in the best position that they can be to get employment or additional training that they might need. Next slide, please. So our mission, I won't read it verbatim, but I mean, at the core for our Division of Employment and Training, what we are trying to do is work closely with employers and with people in the workforce or trying to get in the workforce and their families, with the end results being we're hoping that employers can get the talent that they need and that those individuals and their families can achieve economic independence through the variety of services that are being made available to them. And again, and a lot of that is really the great work that's done by Mari and her counterparts around the state and the dollars that they have to serve these customers. So, but that's truly at its core the mission of what we're trying to do. So next slide, please. I've talked about some of these things, but I wanted to just say a few more. So we manage a statewide labor exchange system through our Job Center of Wisconsin website, which is a no-cost way for employers to get their job postings out on that website and to identify the types of skills that they are looking for in the workforce. And it gives our job seekers the opportunities to go in and get registered and get their resumes out there. And so matches can be made between the skills that they possess and the skills that the employers are looking for. So that is the basics of the state labor exchange system. And then, as I mentioned, through our division, we are always trying to provide current data both for employers and for job seekers on labor market information. For employers, that can be helpful sometimes if they're trying to decide what are the going wages that I need to pay to attract talent right now in my area. It might say to a job seeker, over the next 2 to 4 years, we're projecting these types of occupations to be increasing in demand, and conversely, we're expecting these types of occupations to be decreasing. So people can make informed choices about the types of trainings and work they're looking for. Something I haven't talked about yet, we also oversee the state migrant worker programs. And we have workers coming into the state to work on camps throughout the state, primarily from about March through October every year. And they also seek other services while they're here. Often these workers bring their families with them and their children, and they're getting enrolled in schools or need other types of services. But another critical piece of what we do. And I should mention that for any of these, at any point beyond today, we're always available for questions if anybody has follow-up questions on any of the types of things we're talking about. When I mentioned that we manage the Wisconsin Fast Forward program, we have trained literally thousands of people in the state of Wisconsin through these types of competitive grants when employers have identified needs to get often some of their own current workforce, incumbent workers included, additional training that they might need to be the best workers that they can be. And it's been a very, very popular program, and we continue to put out grants today on this type of with these types of dollars and opportunities. Talked about the apprenticeship programs. You're going to hear a lot from Mari about the WIOA programming. This is one of the ones I think that is most likely, perhaps, where we would see partnering with literacy, and because through WIOA, you know, we're looking for adults, youth, dislocated workers who have barriers to employment, might need adult basic ed services, might need retraining, et cetera, and dollars are made available through our workforce boards to provide services at the local level for these groups of populations to get a wide variety of on-the-job training, classroom training, work experience, employment assistance, et cetera. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do operate the State Veterans Employment Program. And I mentioned that to this group because we also get military veterans coming back that sometimes veterans seek our services that are just fresh out of the military. We also get many veterans who have been out of the military for a long time, have been out of the workforce for a while, or but are looking for some sort of assistance and might be weak in some areas. And our veteran staff are always trying to make sure to connect those military veterans with the best services that will fit their needs. And we have staff throughout the state to help with that. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you just a flavor that we, at the federal level, this WIOA program that we talk about is very intentional. It's intended at the federal level that there are core partners working together, federal agencies, in how we do our workforce programming within the state. And that includes collaborations with the U.S. Departments of Commerce, Health and Human Services, our department, which is the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, the Department of Ag and Housing and Urban Development for sure. So at the federal level, these agencies coordinate closely and help provide guidance and in some cases policy requirements down through the state system that we do with workforce. So I just would want this audience to know that at the federal level, there's a lot of dialogue that goes into what they want states to do with their workforce system. And this is a sampling of some of those key federal agencies that are part of this. Next slide. So you may ask, well, how much money do we get? So this gives you a sense for our state fiscal year 2021 for our department through our division, the types of funding that comes in, and you can see how much the millions that we're getting in the purple shaded area for federal dollars coming into our state that we turn around and use to get monies out to the local workforce boards. We also get in the blue area, we get state funds that we use. Some of the differences between the two, our WIOA programming is all federal money, our job service money, our vets money is all federal money. When we talk about our apprenticeship, there's a combination of state and federal funds. Our Fast Forward program would fall under the general purpose revenue blue side. Just to give a sense, our labor market information is a combination of both. But you can see we get a lot of pushing upwards of $100 million that we get as we're trying to coordinate the work that we do with our partners around the state. So that just gives you a little flavor of our funding within our division. Next slide, please. And then to break it out a little bit more, just to show how this plays out, you can get a sense, and I'm not going to explain all of these, but some of the big ones, WIOA, again, Mari will be talking a lot about that. That's one of the big pots of money that we get for the monies that we give to the workforce boards for serving adults, youth, dislocated workers. A big one, the Wagner-Pizer, which is a federal piece of legislation, is the funding that we get that helps support the costs for our job centers and our job service staff. Veteran services, you'll see the amount of money there. Trade adjustment assistance I haven't talked about, but that's a program specifically for dislocated workers who lose their jobs because their company either moved those jobs to another country or there's been increased imports of the product that a company in this country might be making that's causing the company here to lay off workers. So when we get petitions approved with the Department of Labor under this program, we have dislocated workers that are eligible for significant retraining assistance to get them down a new career path. Next slide, please. So now we're going to just funnel it down a little bit more on these next slides as we get it transitioning over to Mari here. So when we talk about WIOA, I just wanted to show this illustration that we get the monies from the Federal Department of Labor. As you can see in the slide from PY20, program year 2020, that was over $28 million. And it comes to, and we have to give it out in 3 different buckets. The blue section, all of these funds are formula allocated out to the 11 workforce boards and broken out into the 3 categories of funding to serve adults, serve dislocated workers, and to serve youth. And then, and again, and Mario hit on this more as well. Those funds come to us at the state. We then turn around with that formula allocation and send the monies, the majority of those funds out to those 11 workforce boards. We do keep some monies back at the state level for administration work that we're required to do in oversight for these grants. And we keep additional monies back so that we have monies available, especially for things like rapid response when we have to give monies out to the boards when big plant closings or medium-sized plant closings occur, and Mari and her counterparts need additional funds to serve those workers above and beyond the formula allocation that they would get otherwise. And we do special projects at the statewide level with some of those funds as well. Next slide. So the way we function at the state level with our WIOA programming, we actually have some required partners that have to play in this space with us. So Title I is the one I was just referencing when we talk about funding to serve adults, dislocated workers, youth. These are the funds that go out to the workforce boards. The workforce boards play a critical role in everything we do with the WIOA. Title II is the adult basic ed, something you folks would all be familiar with, funding that comes oversight with the technical school system. Title III, the Wagner-Pizer for our labor exchange, is something we manage through our division. Title IV is Voc Rehab, that's another division within our department. And then we have other players that are in our state plan. Our VETS program, our TE program, and this past year we added 3 new state agencies: the Department of Corrections, the Department of Children and Families, and the Department of Health. And that matters because they're all signing on to this plan that they're going to be working collaboratively with us as we continue to expand workforce strategies and solutions around the state with our mutual customers, looking at how we're doing collectively and the outcomes of the participants that we're serving, sharing data and the like. So we're very excited about this combined plan, adding 3 more state agencies to the work that we're doing in the workforce system. Next slide, please. So as part of our WIOA implementation, our division also provides staff to the Governor's Council on Workforce Investment, which would be known as the State Workforce Board. So that there is a large body that the governor has appointed of businesses and public sector folks alike that are all helping to meet with us and discuss workforce issues and make recommendations to the governor on potential, initiatives that should be considered, policies that should be considered, budgeting that might be done to support workforce issues. So that's a big, an important council. A lot of good discussion coming out of that group as we speak now on topics that they want to throw advice to or thoughts to the governor on. And then we have this WIOA Executive Committee. So the secretaries of these agencies are now meeting quarterly because of this new plan. So it's really exciting to be able to sit down with these secretaries and really get their buy-in to the work that we're trying to do with workforce in Wisconsin. So 2 critical levels at the state level on what we do with workforce. Next slide. So this is just a quick slide to show our state plan vision that we did with WIOA. And this one I will read, that we will deliver a results-driven workforce development system that will provide the opportunity for Wisconsin's current and future workforce and businesses to sustain economic viability for individual and family self-sufficiency. That is the driver for everything that we are trying to do with our workforce system in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. So 3 primary goal areas, the 3 A's: access, alignment, and accountability. Behind all of this, we work through our partners, we work through the other state agencies, and are working on new strategic goals and planned outcomes that we're trying to see that can include everything from better co-enrollment between partners, better data sharing between partners, more focused services to businesses, and especially doing more longitudinal studies to look at the data for the programs that we're all running, the people that we're serving, and are we making a difference? The outcomes there to suggest that people are getting towards that mission that we just talked about by the work that we're doing. So these are 3 very critical goals for us. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the state strategies that we have listed in the state plan. Increasing the collaboration and program alignment, using the labor market data, focusing on career pathways, work-based learning, etc. That is driving the work of the committees that we have in place, and it's certainly driving the work that the workforce boards do at the local level as well. And again, we'll take any questions as we go through here, but next slide, please. So now it's my pleasure to turn over to Mari, because she's going to speak about the workforce development areas and all the work that comes through their association, their boards, and all the boots on the ground work at the local level. So Mari, your turn.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us here today, and we're excited to be able to provide a little bit more information on how we can link up adult literacy with the activities that are happening with workforce across the state. So you have the ability to see on your screen, there's a map, and these are the 11 workforce boards across the state of Wisconsin. So you'll notice Milwaukee County is the only single county region down there in Southeast. And then I happen to be the CEO of that lovely peach salmon chunk up at the top. So we have 10 counties geographically. We're the largest in terms of trees and just square miles, but the smallest in terms of actual population. So, but I have been doing this 20 years. So if anything that Bruce just went over with you, you were like, ooh, that was a lot of information. It's okay. It's still a lot of information to me too. So this at least will help you sort of understand where you may lie in some, and you'll notice some of these are pretty big geographic chunks. When you look at like Vilas County to Adams and everything in between, you've got larger MSAs in there, and then you've got incredibly rural, Forest County up at the top. So we sort of have fun geographical challenges that go along with some of our work as well. Next slide, please. So what is a workforce board? If there was ever a 10-second elevator speech for this question, I've never heard it. So, but basically workforce development boards are regional entities. They're mandated through the various different workforce legislation that's come around since the 80s. So there's always been some version of some sort of an oversight board. Many of the workforce boards in Wisconsin are private nonprofits, so they're 501c3s. And basically, it's a collective of private sector leaders from across a region. So you saw I have 10 counties. So all 10 of my counties have private sector business members that sit on my board of directors. And then also combined with that is quite a laundry list of mandatory partners that we'll go over in just a minute. The chief elected officials in the counties do have a role. They appoint the private sector folks. So they pick somebody from manufacturing, they pick somebody from healthcare. And so no matter what we do, the workforce board must maintain 51% private sector. So it always has to be business led. And that's something that is pretty critical in terms of really trying to determine what the needs are and where we need our training dollars to go, and strategically where we're investing in the region. So that's where that main mandate comes from. And we'll talk a little bit more about membership and sort of what the board does in just a second, but that is the 90-second elevator speech for what a workforce board is and what they do. You will see WDB as an acronym. You will also see WIB. Some are workforce development boards, some are workforce investment boards. There's no difference. It's really just what they happen to name themselves. So next slide, please. So community partnerships are critical to the work that the workforce board does. Most of the workforce boards have relatively small staffs. And then what they do is they are able to work with service providers who go out and do sort of the service delivery projects. We'll talk more about that. But the current legislation that we're under came into existence in 2014, and it's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So WIOA, WIOA goes under both names. You guys know acronyms. I'm sure you have your own whole set. But underneath WIOA, there's 4 core programs. So the first is Title I. That's the WIOA that Bruce was referring to. So that's the adult dislocated worker youth. So those are sort of those 3 buckets that you saw in that image with the funding. And then underneath that, you've got Title II, which is adult ed and literacy. And then Title III is Wagner Pizer, otherwise known as Job Service. They're the primary staff that are working with the jobcenterofwisconsin.com website and also in the job centers themselves. And then vocational rehabilitation, which Bruce also mentioned, that's the department that works with individuals who have need for some sort of vocational assistance to obtain employment. And then in with that also is all of the other mandatory one-stop partners underneath the legislation. And I won't read all of those to you, but I'm happy to answer if you're not sure what any of those are. Some of them we see more in primarily our urban partners. The rural areas, sometimes, we don't have a whole lot. Like for instance, for me in Northwest, we do have migrant and seasonal workers, but our entity that sort of oversees it for the state is out of Milwaukee. So they're not necessarily even regional. So we have just an enormous amount of mandatory partners, and then we have elective partners in the communities too. So it's really important to us to have an enormous amount of outreach, folks like all of you and other organizations, so that we're able to not only hear the feedback and what you're hearing from various individuals and communities, but then also to partner up, and so that we're not duplicating and that we make sure that we're maximizing the resources that are out there. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that was posed when we were originally approached about presenting today was sort of what is DWD and then what is WWDA? And so the WWDA is the Wisconsin Workforce Development Association. It's all 11 boards as a collective. So we sort of try to harness the brain power of not only one board, but all of us. So me and then my 10 counterparts, and then all of our board chairs and our county elected officials, and try to bring all of that together to come up with statewide strategies. And so WWDA is really, committed to maximizing Wisconsin's resources, and it's not by region. We just try to make sure that we're doing everything a little bit more as a collaborative and not in competition with each other. So really, WWDA is the conduit. It's an easy outreach point if you're not sure where to start with workforce. We do have an individual who oversees sort of the management of that association. The website's just wwda.org. And we try to put the information up that we're doing statewide. But I think it's important to note, as much as we do everything together as a collective, obviously I'm very different than Milwaukee. La Crosse is very different than Green Bay. So we all sort of have our own flair of how we do things locally, but the mission, the premise, and the legislation is the same. So we're all working in the same way. It's just that sort of we do it in a way that makes sense for us and how it works for us. Next slide, please. So local workforce development boards. So for us, we look at a whole bunch of different things in WIA. First being career pathways, which is a term I'm sure you're familiar with. When I first started in workforce development, it was career lattice, and then I went to career ladder, and now it's career pathways. So no matter what, it's how an individual moves through their career, and then understanding that there's various entry and exit points for them. And so that's become critical for us as workforce boards, as we look at the more barriers that an individual may possess to success in employment, the better it is to give them short trainings that give them transferable skills so that they can take to employment, and then let them have that small success and taste that success, and then sort of move on and move to the next. So for us, career pathways has been critical in sort of bringing some of those trainings into more of a manageable, because it's really hard to think 2 years out, but can you get through 6 weeks? Can you get through 8 weeks? And we'll sort of keep chunking it down for them. Employer engagement, every single workforce board in the state has somebody who does business outreach. And so they're out talking to employers, not only about what the needs are, but also if we have individuals who we're working with that need a job, that need to be placed, then we're trying to see if we can fit and slot them into different places as well. So we do work a lot with employer engagement, and then industry sector work, where we're really looking at the industry. For instance, in Northwest, we have a sector that just looks at sort of lodging, resorts, hospitality, and food service. So all of those collectively together, and then how do they help each other out, and how can we help them? Integrated service delivery, really there's no wrong door, right? Or there shouldn't be. You should be able to contact any one of our partners, and it really doesn't matter, because even if they can't help you and we can, they're going to make that warm handoff. That's the idea. It's not always how it actually works, but that's the idea. But I think it's critical. Title I, which is the program that the workforce boards work with, really, if we get somebody in and we can't help them, we should be able to send them at least to maybe a partner who can, or some other resources or something else that's available for them. I talked about community partnerships, sector strategies I just touched on, and then work-based learning. So when we're working with youth, we can do something called work experience, which is a fully subsidized work program where they're working for an employer, but we're actually the employer of record for them. And then we have the ability to do on-the-job training. And on-the-job training is a program that subsidizes 50% of an individual's wages for a given amount of time, usually 6, maybe 8 weeks. And so it allows an individual who maybe wasn't quite perfect for a job, but was darn close, or maybe just was really great, but just didn't have quite the right skill set, sort of helps the employer mitigate some of the risk with that employee, and then allows them to maybe put like a mentor or another person in position to help them through their training plan for on-the-job training. So that can be a strategy that works really well for employers or for individuals who, again, maybe have a little bit of training, but not the full, skill set yet. But if we can get them in the door, then they can sort of work on that and learn on the job. Next slide. So here's sort of the strategic functions. Bruce touched on a lot of these. We develop a local plan. All of our local plans are on our website. So if you can find your local board, and if you can't find it, you can certainly contact me or put it in the chat, and I'll be happy to tell you if you tell me which county. But you can go to their website. Everybody has their local plan posted. It is not a brief reading document. So I'm warning you now, you may want to Control F literacy and then go find what you're looking for from there. But we do a local plan, and we do that every 2 years. It gets updated, and then it gets renewed every 4. We do workforce research, working with the State Department of Workforce Development. We negotiate our local performance measures. We, like you, have performance measures that we need to meet. Budgets, career pathway development, trying to engage employers, build system capacity. We do a lot of grant seeking and outside resources beyond the WIOA formula funds that Bruce referenced. So that's a portion of what we do, but then we do try to actively go after competitive funds too. So we try to increase sort of the menu of services that we have, so that we have a little bit more flexibility sometimes to have a regional flair instead of it just being just the formula funds. And then alignment of systems. And so the workforce boards oversee the one-stop operator. And this is a whole confusing thing in and of itself. But the one-stop operator basically just ensures that all the partners are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So all of those mandatory partners, everybody that needs to be at the table, that they're all contributing, that they're all helping, that they're all referring, that they're providing service. So there's a different one-stop operator in every region. So we won't even get into that because that will get very confusing, but just worry about the workforce boards right now. We can figure out the one-stop operator stuff later. Next slide, please. So how do we connect with literacy organizations? Hopefully those regional connections are being made on a number of levels. So for most workforce boards, they're going to have the technical colleges at the table. They're going to have a seat on the board. And so hopefully any of those adult education funds are, sort of being represented that way, and we're connecting up. Some of the local or smaller literacy organizations that are out there, same thing. It would be my hope that locally and regionally you would be connecting with them. But if you're not connecting, whether you're at a technical college or with another organization, I would say do the outreach, because sometimes we're never sure either who the right person is, or even at the technical college level, we may have your tech college president on the workforce board, but that doesn't mean that that connection with literacy is always being made, or adult education. So it works really well if we can just, schedule calls and sit down and talk. And then once you better understand our programs and we understand yours, then the referral process starts to really work better. And we can help consumers a little bit more effectively at that point. The other piece is that all of the workforce boards put their money out competitively, either on an annual basis or every couple of years. And so often that's youth funds and adult funds. And so sometimes, if you've got a really great project or you want to respond to that, that's an open procurement. And again, I would encourage you to look at that. Most of the boards, just for your knowledge, start that procurement process right about now. So they're starting to get documents together and get that out. It's always publicly posted on the websites. You can ask them to be added to the bidders list. But so that's one way that we connect to, is that we can help fund programs or fund unique initiatives as long as it meets the parameters of what we're trying to do with WIOA funds as well. So we definitely, the more that we can do the outreach both ways, the better, because we may not even know you exist. Sometimes you saw the geography that some of the boards cover. And while we like to think that we know everything in the region, right? But sometimes we miss something, or there might be turnover, or a new organization comes in. So an old contact becomes, irrelevant, and there's somebody new that's coming in. So I would absolutely suggest connecting with your regional workforce board executive director or CEO. Next slide. So local board involvement. So WIOA requires the local boards to include the representatives. So that's what I was saying. We might have your tech college folks or others, but if there's literacy providers that are out there that don't have a seat, our meetings are open. We're always open to interesting new ideas, ways to better connect. So, again, I would really encourage you to seek out that workforce board director and make that connection. Sometimes we get asked to add seats to the board. That gets a little bit tricky. So just know that because we have to maintain that private sector majority. So every time we add somebody, then we have to add more from the community. If we add a community-based organization, we have to add more private sector. We have a hard enough time finding private sector people sometimes for the boards anyhow, but we're always happy to have you on like ad hoc committees or at meetings. So again, reach out. Every local board is going to have its own policy on this. So I'm really speaking for myself here, but I would appreciate the outreach. Absolutely. If for you guys too, if you're looking for data, the local workforce boards can pull data really, really quickly. So if there's something that you're looking for, again, utilize us. If you're, wondering about unemployment numbers or labor force numbers, we have regional labor market folks who can tap into that for us. And they do it really, really quickly, and they do an excellent job. And I'm not saying that just because Scott Hodek is on this call and listening. So each workforce board, then again, here's that local plan. So we do it every 4 years. When we do it, it's posted for public comment. We encourage public comment. Again, it's not light reading, but there's a lot in there, and we always make them a PDF. You can always Control F on it. So find the sections that you're sort of looking for there. But we do seek the input. And then, like I said, that is like sort of on an every 2-year cycle. It gets sort of updated and then redone every 4. So provided that our legislation doesn't change in the next couple of years, it'll be as it is right now. And everybody just redid theirs. So you should be looking at the freshest, most newest version of that. So that's all that I have. I don't know if you want to put the slide up with our contact information so that if people do have questions, you can absolutely do outreach. Like I said, the Wisconsin Workforce Development Association's website is wwda.org. They do a number of webinars and other things all the time of really interesting topics that you may find just intriguing. So I think it's worth getting on their newsletter list. You can do that on the website. And then if you have any questions about who your workforce board director is or how to do outreach, absolutely contact me. And I'm sure Bruce is more than happy to answer any questions about the work that DWD is doing in the state as well.
Thank you so much, Mari and Bruce. We have about 8 minutes left for questions. This was fantastic information. If folks want to ask questions in the chat, you can do that. Otherwise, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. So give a couple of minutes to let people generate or ask any questions they have. Oh, all right. So do you think community-based literacy should or could be a separate required one-stop partner under WIOA? Adults we represent are often at different educational levels than tech college students, but maybe more experienced in work skills depending on their background or experience before coming to the US.
So my answer to that, to make them separate under WIOA is not entirely possible, just simply because that act is sort of, that ship has sailed. And so the list it is what it is. However, again, having every board is required to have open meetings. Everybody's welcome. So just because you don't have a seat at the board doesn't mean you can't come and have comment or have or be a part of the conversation. So, and I understand what you're saying absolutely about, the different sort of consumers that you might be working with and sort of how that varies. But I think the work that the workforce board does, we don't necessarily care if they're at the tech college or they're with a community literacy provider. If we can help them in some way, we will. We can still do training that either get them to training at the technical college, get them to something else, or just help them find employment. So for us, we're just happy to work with any adult that comes through, and we'll just take them at whatever level they come in.
And I would just add at the state level, just to that same question, similar to what Mari said, we have a lot of discussions with, for instance, the state technical college system staff on a lot of things that we do with WIOA, and always interested in the notion of literacy, if that's a specific discussion point that we should be including as we're having the discussions at the state level about guidance and or directions that we're issuing out to the local system. So that's always something we should be thinking about. And when I mentioned the State Council on Workforce Investment, if there's things specific to literacy, one of our staff does sit on the statewide literacy council. And so this issue of literacy continues to be a topic at the state level as well, and figuring out what are the ways that we should be taking this topic of literacy and issuing, again, guidance to the system, figuring out if there's other funds that need to be made available or whatever. So there's plenty of ways that the topic does come up for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments none in the chat, but please feel free to raise your hand. All right, so we have another chat. I listened to Scott Hodek in the last webinar, and he mentioned Ready for Work program. Can you explain that in a general sense, or can you explain that in a general sense? And is that something that can be used in a correctional or prison setting?
So I think Scott's on this call. I would want to know what he was referencing. If Scott could be unmuted, yes. I would ask that he respond first.
Scott, I will allow you to talk. So you should be able to talk now, Scott.
Hi, yeah, we were actually discussing the job centers in the correctional institutions.
So I'm just going to relook at the question. You mentioned that. Yeah, so and just to add to what Scott's saying, so when we say we are setting up prison job centers, what we're making available through those job centers is job service staff. We are having outreach done through our apprenticeship staff. We are having outreach done through our veteran service staff, through our vocational rehabilitation staff. To the degree that it's workable or doable, Mari or her counterparts will sometimes have their Title I staff coming in. All with the desire that we can meet face-to-face with people that are incarcerated, that are going to be released in the next 6 to 12 months, and help them with their employment and training assistance even before they're getting released. So at its core, that's what we're doing with that initiative.
Excellent, thank you. What are the industries that are present in northern Wisconsin, the area that you represent? How prepared are the youth in that area for the workforce? And what are the career pathways that you are interested in?
Sure. So up in Northwest Wisconsin, if you look at by industry, our top 3 industries are actually local government, hospitals, and education, and restaurants and other eating places. So if you take those out of the equation, right, because government and education is it's industries, but if we're looking at actual sort of more private sector work, we really focus on, we have a lot of healthcare. Up in Douglas County, we have a lot of transportation and logistics. So for freight trucking, but then also the broker ships that come sort of behind that. And then when we get down more towards our southern end, towards Taylor County, that's where we pick up a lot of so we've got manufacturing, a lot of metal based and that up here. And then when we get south, you start to get into mink farming. And then we've got food manufacturing, and then door and window manufacturing down sort of in the southern region. So we have all kinds of industries depending on which county you're in. In regards to the youth being prepared, no, I don't know that they are. We've seen a huge downturn in the amount of youth that are working while currently in K-12. There's not a lot that are doing summer jobs anymore. There's not a lot that are doing youth apprenticeship as much anymore. Some of that obviously is in the last year is sort of that COVID, response. But In general, youth employment is down and has been going down since the 80s when it sort of hit its high. It's not like it necessarily was when I was in high school where everybody had a job. A lot of the kids aren't working anymore. So they come out with very little work experience and then go into education. And if they happen to be going on to a university, some of them are doing, work study, but then they're not working there either. So sort of they're coming out and it's their very first job when they're 22 versus before, everybody had a paper route by the time they were 14. So it's a little bit different. So I don't know that they're always as prepared as we would like to see them. And then in terms of the career pathways that we're building out up here, we worked really hard on a hospitality pathway that actually would be able to take someone through a whole hospitality sort of formation to general manager from coming in. We've got an early childhood education pathway. And then there's a Pathways Wisconsin initiative statewide that has been building out career pathways statewide. And they have several. They're working on a business one right now. They've got healthcare, they've got manufacturing. So from that end, they're sort of building out too. And we're very heavily involved in that because again, we don't want to duplicate anything. If they're going to do it, great, we'll jump on. But for us, early childhood, because of the dearth of childcare in our region is big.
Excellent, thank you. And our job centers coming into county jails, are job centers coming into county jails to prepare those re-entering the community?
They are. It's a little bit different in each region, but we have a Windows to Work program that works in some of the county jails and then also the Department of Corrections facilities in Wisconsin. But then, I can speak to what we're doing. We're in the county jails all the time. We're just actually wrapping up a culinary academy in Bayfield County. We just finished one in Price County. I know we've worked with the technical colleges to bring inmates who have Huber privileges out. So for like welding, machine tool, and then we do a cohort training where they get a credential at the end. So yeah, they're being worked with. And then there's other groups, North Lakes Community Clinic, others that are working with them as well in terms of job prep. So there is quite a bit happening in the county jails. A lot of it is though, determined by how open that jail administrator is to having people come in and work. And so every county is different. And even so, if we're not there, it's not that we don't want to be. Sometimes it's just not of interest.
And then let's take one more comment because I know we're at our time. But we have a comment. I was not aware of the downturn since the 80s with youth working. Can you comment?
Yeah. So I can either send out a resource or if you just Google it, there's been a number of studies. Look for the one by the Federal Reserve that they did about youth employment and how much it's plummeted since the 80s. And sort of it's just this huge line that just drops way down.
All right. Well, thank you. I know we're at our time. This was so helpful. I really just want to thank you, Mari and Bruce, again. And everybody, participants, thank you so much for attending the local job centers and workforce development boards. The next training is Virtual Accommodations 101, tips to support students with disabilities. And that will be tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I am going to send out an email with just a very short survey. We would love your feedback. Again, it's very short and it really helps us to improve our professional development. Also, and then just a reminder, if you enjoyed this session, please join us for the Big Share on March 2nd. That's a day of online giving that really helps us continue to do this work. And again, thank you so much, Mari and Bruce, for presenting today. This was so helpful.
Thanks for having us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.